Oh boy, what did we get ourselves into, man?
Damn.
Lucky, what the hell are you doing?
God damn it, I'm trying to be a Jedi and it's just not working. You wanna try?
Yeah, I don't have the powers, man. But...
Speaking of not having the powers, fucking movie, man.
Yeah, and boy oh boy, did we get ourselves into a little tizzy over this movie, huh?
Hour and a half.
Hour and a half
of complete bullshit.
Complete and utter bullshit. It's the kind of bullshit that's been outside and dried up and you can use as a disc.
Oh man, it was...
If you're wondering why Lucky was doing the coin flip, today's movie is The Men Who Stare at Goats. Yeah, it's bad, but before we get into that, let's do our intro.
Yeah.
Welcome, YouTube, to the Hit or Miss Show. I'm the big dog.
I'm Lucky, y'all.
We have everything we need for the review. We got our beverages.
Got our Florida State flag. And we have the movie. Now this movie, as you can tell from our pre-intro intro, it was The Men Who Stare at Goat, and it definitely hit our miss list.
I think we finally found a movie worse than the Power Rangers.
I didn't think that was fucking possible.
Yeah, it's possible. We found it. If there was a way to find it, we found it.
Oh man, it was just, oh my god,
so,
this movie.
Our last few reviews, except for X-Men 3, which we have a new top 3 so far, and The Men Who Stare at Goats is now officially at the top of our list, by the way, folks.
This movie was so crap, it didn't even deserve its own prop.
No. The closest thing we had to a prop was Lucky flipping a coin.
Yep.
So we do the ratings. It's The Men Who Stare at Goats, Power Rangers, and X-Men 3.
So what do you hate the most about this movie? There's just so much to pick from.
Yeah, I would have to go with the story.
Yeah, that was the main problem with this with this movie.
Yeah,
is the story.
Yeah, if you can't tell, this movie hurt our brains.
Yeah, a lot. We just got done watching it. So.
Yeah, and it was an hour and a half, and I kept checking the time to see how long we had. And the sad thing is like you could watch like 5 minutes of this movie, and it felt like it's been 20 minutes to do it. That's how it felt. I mean, that's how long it dragged out. There's so much fucking padding in this movie.
So much filler. That's unneeded.
Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. It had some good actors in there.
It did have some good actors. And, you know, sometimes you can't blame the actors. Sometimes when an actors get handed a shit script and, you know.
No, I mean, going into this movie, it could have had potential to be good.
Yeah.
But when we were watching it and they had the opening credits, I was looking at the executive producers and they had like 5 executive producers working on this piece. God only knows how many writers. They didn't show how many writers.
Too many hands in the soup makes for bad soup.
Yeah, too many cooks in the kitchen.
So anyways, the whole thing is, it's these military men
who think they have...
Should we start from the very beginning? That'd make more sense.
Was there really a beginning of the movie? Because it kind of just jumped all over the place.
Yeah. Well,
that was another problem with the movie. It just jumped everywhere.
At the beginning of the movie, there is this guy, Bill something or another. I don't remember the exact name.
Played by Jeff Bridges.
Played by Jeff Bridges. And he goes to Vietnam and he jumps off a helicopter. Sorry, he falls off a helicopter.
Lands in cow shit, by the way.
Yeah, and his guns are clogged, and like he looks up and there's a dead body, and one soldier just goes and starts aiming, which gives away their position. They get shot at, and he's like, "What the fuck is everyone doing? Fire! Fire!" And they were all aiming just above his head, and he ended up getting shot.
Yeah.
And that led him to go having this hallucination of the chick who shot him saying gentleness is a strength,
yeah,
or something like that.
Strength and gentleness or some shit like that. I don't know. I at this point,
the gentleness is the strength, I think.
At this point, my brain was kind of shut down at this point.
So while he was while he was recovering in the hospital, he
had the idea of going
Right, trying to figure out what it meant. What could we do softer to make us harder, basically?
Yeah, so he did all these retreats. He did like yoga, naked hot tub retreats. He had one where he fell off the fucking roof, which I thought was.
He's constantly falling through this movie.
Yeah,
like there's 3 scenes where he just falls off of shit.
Yeah, but that was nice because it broke up the drama of this movie.
I had drama in my ass.
And but the very beginning, it shows a journalist and how he got his job, which is kind of funny because the guy dropped dead at the desk in front of him, and he ended up taking his job.
Right.
And he goes and talks to this guy who happens to be
his editor.
Well, his editor was sleeping with his wife.
Right. He had a fake arm.
Yeah, and then they go from there to him talking to a psychic guy.
Yeah.
That could make a hamster's heart stop.
And it got back up afterwards.
Yeah. And I'm like, and he says a Loch Ness monster was a ghost or some shit like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And this was a guy who was in the military.
Yeah.
And he's like, Mom, I got it.
What was it, like the Earth Movement group or something like that?
I don't remember.
It was Earth Movement, hippie, love fest, everybody sleeps with everybody group. With lots of drugs.
Lots.
And hookers.
Yes.
Even though they denied the hookers, but they did not deny the drugs.
That's the later scene in the movie where he gets pulled up on charges.
Yeah. So he goes and finds this Lynn Cassidy guy, which was played by George Clooney.
Yep. They met over at
some convention over in Iraq. No, yeah, he was in Kuwait, which is the border of Iraq. And he needed to get into Iraq because he needed to do some journalistic piece on what is actually going on there, which turned out to be a whole plot point that went nowhere, as that just got shut down quick.
Mm-hmm.
So George Clooney, basically in the movie, plays this nutjob who thinks he's a Jedi master, and yes, that is a correct terminology for the movie.
Yeah, they throw the word Jedi around a lot.
And this is during like the late 70s, early 80s when Ronald Reagan was in office and he was doing the whole Star Wars project.
Star Wars, whatever. Anywho.
The guy wanted to put lasers in space, for God's sake. So anyway, so Jeff Bridges goes before the Pentagon, gets his whole program funded. And on a salary basis, so he goes around and comes back years later to start his own group.
Right, when he left, he was trim, proper, typical Mary grade stuff.
Yeah.
And when he gets back, he's got long hair, he's got a beard, he's wearing love bead necklaces.
He's got a chakra thing in the middle of his forehead.
And his shirt's like down to here.
Yeah, it was
out of place, what it was.
So he tells, so the journalist, played by Ewan McGregor, I believe, tells George Clooney that, hey, I was talking to this other guy that used to be in your unit, and George Clooney just wanders off for no apparent reason, which made the scene entirely pointless because they end up back in the hotel room talking about what just happened 2 minutes ago.
Right, where it's like...
I was like, why? What is the point of that? I mean, like I said, they had a lot of scenes where it went nowhere. A lot of awkward silences, a lot of...
Yeah, like there was one point in the movie where it goes from awkward silence to a 2-second conversation.
Back to an awkward silence.
Back to awkward silence.
And George Clooney and this Ewan guy was having fuck me eyes the whole time in the movie. Yeah, it was... But anyways, he goes from there out to the desert where they spend the night in Iraq, and he tries to cook burgers on this solar cone thing, and
it didn't work.
Yeah, it didn't work. He's like, well, it's officially dark, and we have nothing to eat.
Yeah.
And he had this little gadget. It was called the Predator.
Yeah.
Okay, you get a non-lethal weapon, and you call it the Predator.
Right. And it ends up like it gets someone's finger. But see, the problem with that is you have to get close to someone to even use it, because the thing's only this long.
Yeah, it's like, And at first, when he pulled it out, I'm like, okay, what is he doing with a bottle opener?
Yeah, it kind of looks like a bottle opener.
Literally a bottle opener with you scrape the frost off.
Funny part in the movie where he's just like eyeball and he goes.
Yeah, and the guy's just standing there letting this guy beat the shit out of him.
Right, because you know, it's so small. You gotta be like up in someone's grill to use it.
Oh yeah. It's like I said, and then they talk about. So they flash back, and there's a lot of flashbacks in this movie. Oh my god, they flash back to like 3 different time eras. So they flash back to where he joins up for the basic training, and basically he starts off as this hardcore sergeant guy, and the next thing you know, they're dancing.
Yeah.
Like the spiritual dancing. So basically, he starts out as this hardcore guy, and he goes into, and then next thing you know, they're dancing.
Right.
And
it shows an episode, not an episode. It shows a flashback. Go figure.
Of a flashback.
Yeah, of
a young George
Clooney, and his dad comes in. And he's doing his dancing, you know, typical kid shit. And the dad throws his beer at the wall, and something along. Never mind. I'm not going to say that. But it's not very
basically
nice.
It says quit your dancing.
Yeah.
And yeah, so then then they show like their basic training, and
they basically didn't do any training.
No, it was them like doing yoga out in the courtyard, or them doing spiritual skipping.
Yeah.
And then they did like walking on coals and stuff like that, and I'm like, this is funded by the military, folks. This is funded by the military. And then they get a guy in there that they called the Serpent, played by Kevin Spacey. Decides to try to change things up a bit by plugging into the dark side of the Force. Okay, first of all, talk about the Force, Jedi warrior monks, and super soldiers. Dude, I think they were like predicting the future of Disney buying out. Yeah, we're gonna get to that. That was kind of fucked up. But yeah, they're like predicting the future that Disney's gonna buy out Star Wars and Marvel.
Yeah.
And this movie wasn't that old. It was made in 2009. It was bad.
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
So bad. But so he tries to access the dark side of the Force by giving soldiers copious amounts of LSD and flashing a red light in front of them, and
just one.
Just one. And
yeah,
the guy
because he wanted to expand his psychic
powers,
but he didn't want to do it to himself. He needed a test dummy, and this was the downfall to
the Earth Movement Program or group,
whatever it was called.
The fall of the Jedi, basically. I don't know. George Clooney probably could have come up with a better name than that, or George Lucas. I mean, yeah, this movie it hurts the brain. So yeah, this whole time they're explaining this, they're out in the middle of the freaking desert. The guy vanishes a cloud with his mind, and then they end up, waiting on the side of the road for someone to pick them up, and he's flipping a coin, and he's getting 264 times right.
Yeah.
That it's going to be heads. And then they get into a car. Now every prediction or every psychic powers or Jedi powers that he has all been wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Except for the whole vanishing cloud part. I thought that was pretty neat. And then he did this one thing called the sparkling eye.
Yeah. He's like, you got it? You got it? Yeah. Yeah, and, I got it.
So basically, and so the whole plot of this is just them wandering around the desert because he had a vision.
Yeah.
And anyway, so Bill goes before the courts after this whole incident because the guy ended up shooting himself.
Mm-hmm.
And they discharge him, and they said, well, he was misappropriating funds for prostitution and drugs. So he's like, I did not use money for the prostitution.
Yeah.
Which I thought was funny. Like I said, this movie would have been better as a comedy of errors than a drama. And so basically the general that was in the program killed him, died, and then Bill got dishonorably discharged.
Yeah.
And apparently he came before Lynn Cassidy, George Clooney's character, is a vision, another Star Wars reference.
Right. Yeah.
Called out to him, and then that's how they end up in the desert. I was like, that.
Oh, what about that? What about that scene where it's the three of them and they're sitting in chairs and it's in front of this metal big box with a bunch of little drawers, and the guy's like, "All right, what was that evil dude's name?"
Oh, Kevin. I don't know. Remember
Kevin Spacey's character. He goes like with his eyes rolls up in the head.
Spiritual guide Mon
or something like that. It was crazy.
I see
a tin can
or something like that. And the one guy next to him was like, I see a pencil or something spherical.
Right. And George Clooney says, I see a man
in a chair.
In a chair. Yeah.
And
turns out to be Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah. At this point, this movie was just Kevin Spacey acting like Kevin Spacey, a complete douche.
Yeah.
And so the movie goes on, and again, they're stuck out in the desert because they decided to take the fork in the road and hit a bomb. Like, this whole movie is them stuck out in the fucking desert. Just imagine that. A movie of two people out in the desert,
and
lost.
One of them's in Psycho, and one of them's like, this is starting to sound pretty good.
Yeah, and then the funny thing is the journalist, the investigative journalist, by the way, he's like, oh yeah, Bill came to me in a vision. He's like, are you out of your fucking mind? Okay, it took him an hour and a half to realize that George Clooney is out of his fucking mind.
Yeah.
And they end up getting rescued.
Mm-hmm.
That's the third time they've been rescued in this desert, and they still end up in the fucking desert.
Mm-hmm.
So they end up back at the hotel. He sees Bill, or what looks like Bill, running away from the door because I guess Bill was staring at him because they're lost lovers apparently.
Oh, that was right before the scene where they just drank that mystery water.
Oh yeah. They found a goat. They followed the goat down to this watering hole.
Ish.
And I'm like, oh great, that's how you get hysteria.
Dysentery, yeah.
Yeah.
And helicopter comes, save them. Now they're at the army base. They got an IV hooked up to him, and that's where he sees the Bill. And Bill's just been staring at him like pretty much the whole time. Like you can see the outline of Bill staring at him through the window. Right. Then he follows Bill out to this fucking shed that says restricted area.
Oh, before we get to that, now the movie called The Men Who Stare at Goats.
Yeah.
Kevin Spacey's character tried to do a program where you sit there and you stare at a goat until you make his heart stop.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, for a movie called The Men Who Stare at Goats, there's only one fucking scene where they stare at a goat. So anyways, going back to the building, that's why I brought that up, is going back to the building, he opens the doors and there's all these fucking goats.
Right, and the Bill guy's like trying to hide in the corner.
Yeah. He's trying to hide. This 6'5" guy, 6'5" guy is in a corner like this, and these goats are only like maybe a foot, 2 feet off the ground.
Oh, and that whole, what's that thing called again?
The Dunmock.
Yeah.
The Dunmock or whatever it's called.
They believe that it's a force that will kill you. You don't know when or how it will kill you, but it will kill you.
Yeah, they said that a monk used it one time, and then 18 years later, the other monk died.
Yeah.
He's like, you don't know when it's going to hit. First of all, it would have been nice to know how old the monk was when he died.
Right.
He could have died of old age for all we know.
Yeah, he could have been 100 years.
Yeah. So the whole time he's talking about having Crohn's and cancer, and he's like, well, that's not what's killing me. The Denmark's what's killing me.
Yeah. And that's where the guy's like, oh, he's dying of a broken heart. Maybe cancer, too.
Maybe cancer, yeah. The investigative journalist thinks it's maybe cancer.
And,
But the first diagnosis was he's a broken heart. The movie's wrong, guys. We don't know why it's wrong. Well, we do know why it's wrong. It fucking sucks.
Oh, what about that scene where they actually staring at the goat and like George Clooney's just having like, I'm gonna fucking kill you in his eyes look.
Yeah, and then
at this goat, and this goat just goes.
Yeah, the goat's like chewing on hay or something, then stops and just been like.
Yeah, like a fainting goat would.
Yeah, and the funny thing is like the project was supposed to be known as the Dog Project, but they couldn't kill the dog.
Yeah, they couldn't shoot the dog. Yeah.
Because what it was a program that was they would shoot the goat in the leg with a bolt gun and then fix it. Again, another plot point that went nowhere. I mean, there's a lot of plot points in this movie that went
Nowhere. What about the time where they put fucking LSD in the egg?
Oh, yeah. So they get an idea. Well, before that, they find the dark side of the Force, which was a guy listening to Barney over and over again and hallucinating. And, not hallucinating, but had strobes and listened to Barney, and apparently it made him crack. And so they put LSD in the powdered eggs and the water, but they didn't tell the guy that they put it in the water.
Yeah, they didn't tell the news guy.
Yeah. So they're all sitting there drinking and eating eggs, and they're watching these guys getting stoned, and they're releasing these prisoners of war, by the way.
Yeah.
And so they release these prisoners of war, and then they drink. The guy's like, "Oh yeah, by the way, I put LSD in the water," and he's like, "I was drinking the water." Well, I didn't want to arouse suspicion. And Jeff Bridges says the greatest line in the movie. He's like, "I spent years training my body to withstand heavy narcotics."
All narcotics.
All narcotics. All right, so it's the very end of the movie. They get in a helicopter and they're going off on some other mission, to save the Earth movement, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, first of all, those guys are in fucking jail.
Yeah. Oh, and they got people who are high on LSD flying a helicopter.
Driving a tank. We got to the point where Kevin Spacey pulls a gun on him, and he's like...
And he sticks it in his mouth, and he's like, I'm hungry. And he walks away.
And then finally, at the end, he's like... He runs through a wall.
Yeah. The world needs the Jedis. This movie sucked. I hated it. It made my brain rot.
Yeah, it was just... the other side of bad.
We didn't think we'd be able to find a movie worse than Power Rangers. Lo and behold,
we found one.
We found one.
And we might even find a movie that's worse than this one in our next review.
So, as far as the men who stares at goats should have been the men who stares at big old fat zeros.
The men who stare at bullshit. I would rather watch a movie of a guy staring at a plate with bullshit on it.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't our favorite.
It was wrong. The movie was wrong. The directors, the writers, the producers, everybody was wrong in this movie.
It was crap.
And I said it before, this movie was just way too long. I mean, hell, 10 minutes of the movie, I'm like, is it over yet?
Yeah.
I mean, because the actors weren't bad. The actors were really good. The acting was great. It was spot on. George Clooney being George Clooney, Kevin Spacey being Kevin Spacey, Jeff Bridges just basically being the
and
big...
you know what dumbfounds me personally? Is this movie actually didn't do great at the box office.
But it didn't do bad either.
But it made it into the green.
Yeah, it was like a $24 million budget on a $69 million box office.
Yeah.
Which, if you figure after everything, they've only made like $20 million on the movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was our show. And
tell us what you thought. Put it down in the comments.
This is our miss.
Yeah.
Like, share, subscribe, ring that little bell, y'all.
Ring a ding, ring a ding.
So if you guys want to know what our next movie is going to be, it's going to be another miss.
Yeah.
It's going to be called Chips.
I've never seen it, so I'm going into it, and I'm probably going to think it's shitty because I'm kind of a movie snob.
Yeah, me too. I like good movies. Now, I like good movies, but we've been on a roll lately of good movies, so maybe it's time for us to do some shitty ones.
Well, anyway, y'all have a good night. As always, I'm Lucky.
I'm the big dog, guys.
Good night.
Good night.